Hello and welcome to episode 19 of 21 for 21, 21 lessons for sport media in the 21st century. My name is Jamie Coles and joining me as ever is Stuart Levy. Stuart, how are we this afternoon?
Yeah, all good. Thanks again, as always, Jamie. Very happy to be joined this afternoon by Steve Fleming from Kick for Life. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much and great to be with you guys.
No problem. So the reason why we've got Steve on board, Jamie, I think this is quite exciting. This is our first author on the show to talk about the new books. I think it's a nice direction for us to go on because our theme is 21 lessons for sport and media. So this is we're looking at a sporting lesson, but not necessarily in the media sphere. So it's really nice to have Steve on as a bit of a different guest than what we've had in the previous weeks.
Yeah, so Steve, an author, but like sort of Stuart said, you part of Kick for Life and various things going on. So do you want to kind of just start off by introducing yourself? Tell us a bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure, yeah. So I'm co-founder and co-chief executive of Kick for Life, which is a sport for development organisation based in Lesotho in Southern Africa. Kick for Life is a charity, but it's also a social enterprise and actually an elite football club as well. So a number of different things. And the book is really the author component of my current life has grown out of that endeavour, really, of setting up and running Kick for Life over the years and becoming part of a wider global community of organisations that use football for social change.
So when we were talking just before we went on air, I got the pronunciation of Lesotho completely incorrect. So I do apologise. So yeah, the main question is, Jamie and I are both Brits working abroad. So what led you to a country that maybe not all of us even know about if we're getting the name of it wrong?
Yeah, well,
what was your job before your past life, as it were?
Yeah, well, firstly, you're not on your own there. Most people get it wrong first time, but or have not even heard of it. Actually, it's a small country fully surrounded by South Africa. Yeah, and not very well known. But yeah, the whole thing started off in 2005. I came up with the idea of I was working in London at the time in marketing, and I wanted to do a challenge. I wanted to take on a challenge and do something that used my own love of sport and football to make a difference. And came up with this crazy idea of dribbling a football over a vast distance, and got my brother involved, and we identified it was actually Malawi where we did the challenge, and we dribbled a ball for 250 miles across Malawi in 10 days intended as a one-off fundraiser. But the whole experience and seeing how football could engage young people, particularly in Africa, led us to, even before we came home from Malawi, we knew this was going to be the start of a bigger adventure, and that's where Kick for Life grew from.
That's amazing. What a origin story that is. Everyone needs a brother to take on those kind of endeavors with right? These crazy ideas. So that was where the challenge started, and then it took you to form Kick for Life in 2005. Am I right in thinking? I made some notes before the.
Yeah. So we did the challenge in June 2005, and then we very quickly realised, right, we're going to set up Kick for Life as an organisation.
And ultimately, the organisation is testing young people for HIV. Is that kind of the main goal of the?
Yeah, I think when we started out, that was definitely the primary focus of our work. So it was HIV prevention,
Right.
using football to engage kids in a topic that they otherwise probably wouldn't want to talk about. So breaking down those barriers and then encouraging and motivating testing. So certainly that was, for the first decade, I guess, that was the main focus, and it's still a focus of our work, but other layers have now come into what we do. So we do a lot of work now around gender equality, promotion of women's empowerment, and also employability skills. And we've set up a couple of social enterprises. So we run a restaurant and a hotel now, which generate income for our football programs, but also provide training and employment opportunities for young people coming through. So yeah, moved from that, started off exclusively, I guess, HIV and AIDS education and prevention, and then moved into other things.
That's pretty amazing, and it's football brings together so many people to do these sorts of massive social changes. But where does someone even begin with something like this?
Yeah, well, when we finished that dribbling challenge in Malawi, we just sort of sat down and said, right, where are we going to go? What are we going to do for our project? And we thought about going back to Malawi, but actually Lesotho stood out for a number of reasons. Being a relatively small country, we thought we could go there, and we knew that we'd be the only sport for development project pretty much in the country. And also there was a huge need around HIV prevention. The country's got the second highest prevalence in the world, around about 23.6%. It is, so huge need, and also that passion for football. So we decided on Lesotho, managed to get some funding. That was kind of the first big step to get some significant funding. And then my brother actually moved out in 2006 to start the project on the ground. So a huge change for him. And it grew from there. We were just in those days, early days, relentless. Just we knew we wanted to start this project, and to get it off the ground, we just threw everything we had into building partnerships, accessing funding, getting other people to join us on the adventure, and yeah, quickly grew from there.
These partnerships, were they with existing kind of government departments or companies in Lesotho, or were they from back in the UK? You were doing most of your more fundraising efforts.
So it's a real mix. So we managed to get our initial funding from the Vodafone Foundation in the UK, and that was via a link with Centre Barley, which is a charity set up by Prince Harry. So the timing was very good. We the day we launched at St Mary's Stadium in Southampton in 2nd of May 2006, the exact same day that Prince Harry launched his charity, and we heard about it on the same day, contacted them, and that opened up a lot of doors actually, as well as the Vodafone Foundation. It also led to a link with the English FA, and led to a visit from Fabio Capello in 2008, who at the time was the new, just recently taken on the role of England coach. And that led to, we got some incredible media exposure. We've been around for 6 months, and suddenly we had double page spread articles in every national newspaper in the UK. We're on Sky Sports News. And that really, as a young charity, gave us a great platform to build other partnerships and gain exposure.
So what were the almost challenges of that time? If you were such a new charity and all of a sudden the England manager's visiting you, could you cope with that increase in demand, or did you sort of take it on your chin and you were ready for that sort of exposure and growth?
Yeah, well, Pete had very quickly built a presence in Lesotho, built a community of young volunteers who were really enthusiastic about what we were doing. We had a curriculum that was founded on empowering young people to deliver the sessions themselves. And so when we were contacted by the FA, we were confident we could put on a great event. We put on one of our testing events, Test Your Team, which combined a football tournament with health education and testing opportunities. And Capello came with Ray Clements, and because the FA had organised it as a kind of an opportunity for Capello to build a relationship with the British press, all senior members of the British press came out to our little event, and it turned into an event that gained a huge amount of exposure. Capello sat with a young lad who was tested for HIV and called it one of the most moving moments in his life in football, and that got the headlines.
You know, I'm pretty sure I definitely watched it. I think you got on Football Focus, it might have been, or even I definitely remember it at the time. Yeah. So it's certainly something that stayed with me. That's put the country on the map, and also putting two and two together. That's something you and your brother were strongly involved in.
Yeah, I was gonna sort of ask a similar question. You said you came from marketing, so I was just wondering sort of if you felt prepared to deal with all that media exposure at the time. You know, we were a sport media podcast, and so it'd be negligent of me not to ask. But like suddenly you were thrust into the spotlight in that way.
Yes, I had a bit of experience, but it was certainly nothing that we anticipated. We knew that we had people coming over, but the level of interest and the sheer, like, the horde of journalists that were there was we weren't totally prepared, but we didn't really need to be. The story kind of wrote itself, and it was such a powerful story and such a powerful statement from Capello that it hit the headlines, and actually, you know, helped us to gain a real good position. I mean, consolidated our partnership with the Vodafone Foundation. On the back of that, we were able to build, along with doing great work out on the ground, to build a longer relationship with them as well.
So right now, sorry, Stuart, go on.
I was going to say, sorry to almost make too much of a marketing podcast, which we want to move away from, but I have targets in my role, maybe Jamie does in terms of social media views, but did the Capello experience help you to really hit your targets in terms of testing, in terms of getting people aware, or did it sort of get an initial spike, then it went back to normal as it were in terms of your testing routine and on the daily basis?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it really changed that. We had certain targets that we had to meet, and we would have made them regardless. But it just gave us a lot. It gave us a real energy boost to the organisation, certainly locally for the young people we were working with, to suddenly have one of the biggest names in football coming over. Generated a lot of excitement around the organisation, and that exposure. Then when we went to speak to new potential funders, they might have heard of us already and the work we were doing, rather than having to introduce it. It was already something in their minds. So yeah, it was. I'd say it was huge, and also the involvement of Prince Harry around about that time as well. We were just very fortunate. I think the timing of the World Cup being in South Africa, there was a lot of attention and energy around that, and that led to other opportunities. So our centre that we eventually had in 2011 also came from the legacy that came out of the 2010 World Cup.
So, by my calculation, 17 years then with Kick for Life in action. You've since, and you just mentioned the centre that you got in 2011. You spoke earlier about the restaurant and is it in hotel and conference centre?
That's right. Yeah.
And you're now campaigning for a stadium, which I'd imagine will house. And one of the first things that happened when I Googled it, and maybe this is because Google knows that I look at football results very frequently, is that Kick for Life has both a men's and a women's football team, and playing the Premier League, the Lesotho Premier League. Am I right in thinking?
Yeah, Lesotho.
I think as of
Lesotho
Premier League, as of recording, I think they're the ninth. The men and the women stand in second. I think is the.
That's right. Yeah, exactly right. So, yeah, to take you back a few steps, we never really intended to have an elite side to what we did. We kind of were very careful not to, because we thought it could damage our credibility. But we had teams that got set up. And they started to do really well, and then they started to progress through the league system, and we started to see some real benefits from actually having those teams. So increased interest, a stronger platform for our wider messaging from having that exposure and interest, a real energy and excitement within our staff team. Like most of the players at the beginning were from our staff and volunteer base. And so we decided to embrace it, and we then transitioned from being just Kick for Life to being Kick for Life FC. And the world's first football club exclusively dedicated to social change. So we were pursuing success on the pitch, but our bottom line kind of goal of that success was that it would support our social mission. It's been really exciting. We've been in the Lesotho Men's Premier League now since 2014, and then we were founding members of the Women's Super League in 2015, and are very heavily involved in trying to grow women's football. And there's a lot of gender inequality and discrimination in Lesotho, and football is one really powerful way of tackling that. So having that women's team has been an enormous asset in addressing some of those issues. And then I should tell you about the stadium as well. So, and then we've had this as our centre site, this vision of developing a stadium, or really a small kind of facility for playing our home for our teams, but also an extension of our social enterprise model, additional space for delivering our programs. We've actually now got some funding in place, and a pitch has been pledged by SAS Pitches, one of the world's leading providers. So yeah, it's been delayed by COVID, but the plan is there, and we're going to develop this stadium, probably 2,000 seater stadium. Hopefully see that come to life in the next couple of years.
That's amazing. So it's true. Our first author and our first CEO of a football team on the podcast.
Yeah, I wanted to also ask Steve, is also our first top division player, because you mentioned at first Kick for Life, it was your staff team or volunteers team, then it joined the Premier League. I guess you were involved in the staff kickabout. How big was the step up to the Lesotho Premier League? Did you name yourself on the bench, or how did that work?
Well, a bit too old for that, but yeah, maybe 20 years ago. But the team evolved, and actually it grew. Some of those staff and volunteers have remained in the team and progressed to being to other roles. And then we've actually moved into bringing new players in, and also youth development's massive. I think we've probably got one of the strongest systems in the country. So a lot of our new players come through our own investment in supporting and developing young players, but not just on the pitch, kind of holistic support. So we pay for school fees, we do educational support, nutrition support, a lot of character development, and yes, hoping that whether they go on to actually be footballers or something else, that they're going to be in a good position for the rest of their lives.
So how you mentioned it's the first football club in the world to be run by social change, or for social change, sorry. So how does that translate onto the pitch? Like if you've lost 5 games in a row in any other club, they'd be like, sack the coach, sack the manager. But because you're run for social good, how would you have to balance progression on the pitch with progression off the pitch, which is the main purpose?
Yeah, good question. So obviously we try and run the organisation and the teams as responsibly as possible. So it's looking after the well-being of the players and the staff. At the same time, we recognise that sometimes you need to bring new players in. Sometimes people need to move on to other things. So just acting responsibly. Always having in mind that the teams are really a reflection of the whole organisation. They're kind of the outward-facing part of the organisation. So we need to make sure that they're run as well and professionally as possible, and that they actually do support our social mission and not have a negative impact on that.
So talk to us then a little bit about Steve Fleming, the author, and how that came about and how that fits into this wider world of Kick for Life.
Yeah, so I've actually written 2 books now. That I wrote one in 2010 called 11, quite in the early days of Kick for Life, and it told the story of 11 individuals from around the world whose lives have been transformed by organisations like Kick for Life, but in totally different contexts and addressing different social issues. And then kind of waited 10 years and then decided it was time to write another book. And that was during the
difficult second book, right? Is that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think it was during the lockdown period I had a chance to think and reflect a bit more and decide that, this is something I'd like to do. And went through a few different ideas of what I could write about, and eventually decided that it could be a story around not just Kick for Life, but the whole sector of football for good, and telling that story. So that's when I approached Jürgen Greisbeck, who's the founder of Street Football World and Common Goal. I've known him for years, and I've always known that he's got an amazing story of entrepreneurship and using football for social change. So I approached him and asked if he'd be keen to collaborate on writing a book, and he was up for it. And then we spent most of 2021 writing it, and the end product is Radical Football.
So was writing something that sort of came naturally to you, or as again, to sort of link back to your marketing experience? I know quite a few marketers that have passed into from the dark side into the author kind of role, or was it something that you felt compelled to do, or what? How did 11 come about? Let's say.
Yeah, so I've always liked writing. In terms of creativity, it's one of my stronger points amongst a load of other weaker points. So I think writing is something that I like to think I'm reasonably good at, and I enjoy doing. And so yeah, that's really where 11 came from. But also 11 was not just about Kick for Life as well. It was about the wider community that we've become a part of, which is called Street Football World, which is a network of over 150 organisations around the world that use football for social change. And where we became a part of that as pretty much as soon as Kick for Life was founded, and really embraced it, not just being on our own, but being part of this kind of global community was amazing. So the book gave a platform for 11 of those organisations to tell their story. And then the Radical Football is in a similar vein, really, but founded on Common Goal, which is kind of the evolution of Street Football World.
So I've heard of Common Goal from Juan Mata. I guess was he the first high-profile footballer to join, or was he involved in the foundation of Common Goal?
Yes, he's a co-founder. He was so Jürgen Greisbeck, who's kind of the main person featured in the story. He founded an organization in Colombia in the 1990s, addressing violence in Medellin at the time, the most violent city in the world. But quickly then saw that there were other projects around the world doing similar stuff. So he created a network, Street Football World. And then beyond that, the next creation was Common Goal, which is aiming to actually change the football industry and embed purpose within the football industry. In 2017, he got in touch with Juan Mata. He'd heard Mata talking on a TV program about the social dimension of football, and it resonated with Jürgen. They got in touch and started having a conversation. And the end result was the creation of Common Goal, which is a movement to embed a 1% principle of donating income to a common pot that then goes towards using football for social change. So motivating players, clubs, coaches, brands to give 1% of their income from across the football industry, which obviously is a huge industry, and that 1%, if it became like a standard, would be a huge contribution to various social issues.
Yeah, I noticed Adama Traore, who's on loan to Barca, is one of the most recent signings, if you like, for Common Goal. So
yeah, it's great, and
there's some big names in there. You know, Stuart mentioned Juan Mata, I've seen Jurgen Klopp, and
yeah, some great names: Chiellini, Viviane Miedemar, Megan Rapinoe, Alex Morgan, loads of players from the women's game as well. So it's been really successful. There's 400 members now of Common Goal. And they're just really hoping now to grow that across the football ecosystem. They've also got a few there were clubs on board: Oakland Roots in the USA, FC Nordsjælland in Denmark, who give 1% of their income, and then also brands such as Adidas, who have pledged 1% of all global football sales for the next few years. So the potential is enormous, and I think there's a real appetite for kind of collective philanthropy in the football industry as well. Eni Aluko is one of the people who contributes to the Radical 11, wrote a brilliant article, and she says that she was always drawn to this idea of football's a team game, and so is social change. So yeah, really exciting where it could go.
So just and for on the Common Goal, obviously the 1%. So a footballer, so practically they choose which of the causes in the network it goes to, or is there a central pot that Common Goal then distributes it equally between the partners? How does it work in practice?
Yeah, so it's a flexible model. So the players can select a particular cause or organisation they want to support, something that's close to their heart, or they can just give it to a general pot that's then distributed to the organisations that are part of the Common Goal community. But they're all kind of accredited and assessed every year. So it's a really good system in place to ensure that the funds are put to great use. But yeah, for example, Serge Gnabry, another person who contributed to the Radical 11 with a great article, he's got close links with the Ivory Coast, so he directs his support to organisations that are working in that country.
So you mentioned the Radical 11 there, and that was one of the kind of the talking points that we spoke about ahead of recording. Could you just explain to us kind of who are the Radical 11 and what part do they play in all of this?
Yeah, so as we wrote the book, we never necessarily envisaged having this as part of it. But as we moved kind of towards the present in the story, we realised that we also wanted to look towards the future and put forward a vision of football as a purpose-driven sport. But Jurgen and I realised immediately that we couldn't credibly articulate that vision for the future of football just by ourselves. So that's where the idea of inviting 11 different people from across the world of football to put forward their ideas and their vision for the game would be much more powerful. So we started to approach people that we felt had radical ideas and progressive ideas about the sport. And so, yeah, the lineup is quite amazing. And we've got the likes of, I've mentioned already, former player like Eni Aluko, current player like Serge Gnabry. We've got club owners such as Dale Vince at Forest Green Rovers, the world's greenest club. Moya Dodd, one of the first women on the board of FIFA, has written a fantastic article. Jonas Bear Hoffman, who's the managing director of FIFA Pro, so looking at it from a well-being perspective as well of players. And yeah, it's some brilliant articles. Khalida Papau, another one, the founder of the Afghanistan women's football team, a really incredibly moving and inspiring article about how football can represent the most marginalized people in the world. So yeah, I'd recommend reading it.
No, absolutely, and I have to confess at this point I hadn't read it, but it's on my pile of to read. So
stuff.
I'm very excited to read it. How did you go about sort of assembling these contributors then to the book, and what was kind of the process there?
Yeah, so we through Common Goal, some of those people were already involved, so there was an existing relationship there where we could approach them. Others, it was more of like a cold approach, and we just explained what we were doing, and people were keen to get involved. So then we gave them a briefing. Please, the article is about your vision for football. What do we do to make football better? And with a particular look towards the 2030 deadline of the Sustainable Development Goals. Within that next 8 years, what do we do to change the role of football in society, to transform the role of football in society? We've got the 2030, the centenary of the Men's World Cup and the 2030 development goals. So by then, how can we say that football is now a genuine force for good, not just with charitable efforts happening on the periphery? You know, these things are great, but actually putting purpose at the core of the sport, and to really leverage the world's most popular sport for the many disadvantaged people around the world.
So without wanting to give away too many spoilers for future readers of the book, but how different or how similar are the ideas? Obviously, you've got Dale Vince, who's obviously well known for his ecotricity and his more, I almost think to say vegan, sustainable lifestyle, whereas you got Serge Gnabry, who's a multi-millionaire. So are their chapters completely different, or is there one kind of unifying theme that you notice between these really interesting mix of people you got to contribute?
Yeah, well, we didn't necessarily expect them or want them to align all that closely. It turns out there is great, powerful alignment between them in terms of things like compassion, about the need for diversity within the governance of football. That's a big thing that came through as needs to change. But yeah, compassion and putting well-being and those types of things at the heart of the game. Environment was, I guess, one thing central very much to Dale's article. It was really powerful. But yeah, sort of mobilizing that global football community. Things like common goal, if it could be standardized across the industry, 1% of all transfers, for example, if that was systemized within the world of football, it really changed the face of the game, I think. So yeah, there's some of the things that came through.
You talked before about when you sort of founded Kick for Life, it was an opportune moment, if you like. If you said it was, you know, the World Cup in South Africa and things are the way they were. I have this feeling recently that football is on the precipice of quite dramatic change, with the sort of proposals of the Super League and, you know, people wanting to shake it up for the 21st century, this sort of new digital age that we're living in. And do you think that perhaps movements such as Common Goal are timely in that sense, in that things are starting to change, and perhaps there's a way of steering that to change for the better in terms of the wider social impact?
Yeah, it's definitely an opportune moment. I think since the early 90s, football has changed dramatically. It's, you know, become big business, huge global entertainment industry. And I guess there's question marks around how sustainable that is. The more it becomes a business, the less potentially it becomes appealing to many people. And part of the solution could be that, yeah, to make it more sustainable, is putting social good at the heart of the game. And that's one of the things we talk about, is this evolution of football. And maybe the next phase is one where purpose becomes the heart of the sport. How amazing would it be if football became synonymous with purpose and social change as much as it did with business? And it's not an impossible idea, for those two themes to run alongside each other.
Yeah, that would be a really interesting contrast. You're right, because I guess maybe this is a stereotype, but everyone in Lesotho, maybe they're wearing Liverpool or Man United shirts anyway. So on the one hand, they are caught up in this global football, that they're watching the English Premier League, European Champions League. But on the other hand, yeah, why can't what they're already watching anyway, this big global business, be a more charitable, more sustainable business? So it is really interesting to see, where do you draw the line between, you're right, the difference between success or traditional success and a more new definition of it on a sustainable theme.
Yeah, and the book doesn't necessarily attack, you're not attacking business or the business success of football. That's just, that success is one part of football's potential to have a social impact. Jürgen talks about it as being the one great unifying force that we have in the world at the moment. And obviously football's not a cure for all the problems of the world, but it is an unprecedented unifying force in the sense that it unites people more than it divides. And more than half of the world's population have some kind of stake or interest in the game. There's not many other things, or if any other things in the world, that have that kind of spread.
Yeah, definitely. And you see that, I think, with how these global events, excuse me, have an impact on their local regions. I mean, and the World Cup's going to be held in Qatar, and then but we've seen it travel through South Africa from 2005, and these global events, such as World Cup, such as the Olympic Games, they do have a very dramatic impact on bringing not only financial gains to an area or region, but also giving visibility to some of the social issues that perhaps that area is facing. I remember quite clearly that with the South Africa World Cup, and I think we're likely going to see it with Qatar. Some of the social issues that are faced out there, and I know there's been a lot of criticism for that. But the World Cup going to Qatar, and I kind of sit on the side of the fence where actually a bit more visibility for these issues is probably going to be for the greater good. So how kind of important looking forward then are these kind of global events, or the direction that football takes going to be to these social causes, and what do you hope, as Steve Fleming, author and co-founder of Kick for Life, hope will be the biggest kind of takeaway in terms of what needs addressing in the next, I don't know, I'd say it's 2030?
Well, I'd say the biggest opportunity is women's football. It's the biggest growth area of the sport right now, and the most exciting area of sport. So I'd like to see women's football reach a level where it's kind of operating on the same scale as men's. And it's one of those things that a few years ago, if I'd said that, it would have almost been laughable. But actually, I believe it's realistic that it's going to attract the same interest and attention globally as more investment comes into the game, and as more opportunities come, that the Women's World Cup could be on the same stage as the Men's World Cup, could even happen at the same time, like in parallel. So that's one potential change that could happen that would expose the women's game to a truly global audience, a larger global audience. And then I think there's new markets for the game as well. So although it's globally massive already, you've got places like China and India where I'm sure football could grow further. So yeah, and I think in parallel with that is thinking about things like common goal as football continues to grow and become even bigger business. How do we make sure that doesn't get lost, and that we keep having things like common goal embedded in the sport? And I think that does come down to the governance of the game. So big change that we want to see, I guess, at global governance level is true diversity and a change of mindset in the purpose of football at that top level of decision making in football.
So in your 17 years since Kick for Life started, or you did the challenge in Malawi, do you already notice a lot of change for good, or is there still the same frustrations that you feel that things haven't moved on either fast enough or not at all since 2005?
Yes, I think definite progress within the football for good sector. So Kick for Life, when we came into being, there weren't that many football for good organisations around, and now there's a lot. There's a lot more, and a lot more clubs have got foundations that are serious social organisations. So instead of being something that's more used to identify young talented players, football clubs in the Premier League, for example, are taking their social responsibilities seriously. My hometown, originally Southampton FC, have got an amazing foundation that does great work across the community, really high quality initiatives. So I think that's been great. And things like Common Goal have now tried to break into the industry and make systemic change within football. And I think that's really where we now need to see more things happen, where the real potential is.
Do you think something like the pandemic has that made things faster? Like have you noticed any people becoming kinder and more considerate of others, or would you say it's held progress back because it's made things like travel less possible?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. I'd say we're maybe at a similar place where we were. I don't think it's necessarily changed people's attitudes to be more socially focused. I don't necessarily see that having happened. I think the European Super League or the stopping of the European Super League was a positive thing, but I think it may have reinforced this idea that what we had before was good. And actually, I don't think it was particularly. It was great to see fans stand up and say, we want to protect our clubs, but I think we could have seen greater action prior to that, before clubs started to really get taken away from the fans, as they were in the 90s and the early part of the 21st century. So I think trying to mobilise supporters to be more active in making sure their clubs are socially responsible is a big thing. We've got a great contribution in the Radical 11 from Preeti Shetty, who's on the board of Brentford and the only South Asian woman on the board of a Premier League football club. And she talks about Brentford as a community-focused, genuinely community-focused club. And I think there's a lot that other clubs could take from their example.
Yeah, I think, I think that's probably a nice point to move on to questions about like what could we as fans of the sport, as individuals, what could we do? What's the kind of actionable thing on the ground?
Yeah, so I guess it's to become ambassadors for types of things that I've been talking about. So holding your club to account in terms of its social responsibility. At what point do you walk away from a team? I mean, it's one of those questions that football fans don't like to think about. But when your team gets taken over by people with an unscrupulous past, do you just keep supporting them just because that's your team, or do you change? So that's a key question, I think. Jurgen's also starting a new movement called Game of Our Lives, a new exciting project kind of that builds on Common Goal and is aiming to create a global platform where people can take action in football, whether that's volunteering or becoming part of a campaign or starting a project in their own community. So that's an interesting thing to look out for in the next year.
So how is in sort of practical level again? So how is Jurgen using the networks he's already got, or is it just something you're trying to do via social media? How, I guess it might be a simple question, but how does one create a global movement these days?
Yeah, well, they're aiming to use some of the players and community they've built already with Common Goal. So using those players to attract fans and other stakeholders to become a part of that movement for social change. So, for example, William Troost-Ekong is part of a racism campaign to get people to support that. And there's going to be more of those types of campaigns coming on board. I think the role of athletes has changed, hasn't it? I think we've seen with the likes of Colin Kaepernick and Marcus Rashford and Wamata that they're starting to think about using their platforms and for social causes. And actually, those guys don't have to be unusual. They don't have to be outliers. If they could actually become the norm. And I think that's part of the thinking behind Game of Our Lives, is that if we all, if those players are then used to attract other people to come on board with anti-racism messages or gender equality, and we can really achieve scale.
And what about someone listening that's sort of thinking, hey, I love football and I'd love to get involved in some kind of social action around football. I'm not suggesting that maybe they walk away from their club and start FC United or an equivalent of, but if they wanted to get involved in something like Common Goal or Kick for Life, are there opportunities for people to do that kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, Common Goal is for everybody. It's not just for players. So that 1%, you can become a member of Common Goal and donate 1%. Kick for Life, one of our big things over the years has been the All-Stars tours, where we take people out to Lesotho on sort of 10-day trips, where they participate in a number of activities. They play football against local teams, but we also train them up to deliver some of our health education activities, which is always a highlight of the trip. So supported by our local coaches, they go into schools and work with young people using football to deliver health education around HIV prevention, etc. So yeah, we've probably taken more than 200 people out to Lesotho now since the start, since 2007 was our first trip. It's an amazing experience, and it's been the kind of the foundation of our supporter network of the organisation. Really incredible experience that people have when they come out to Lesotho with Kick for Life. And we've got another one in 2024 coming up in March 2024. So that's the next opportunity.
The date for your diaries.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is something that is open to anyone or just within football? Sorry, I think I missed the start of your description there.
Yeah, no, so it's open to anyone, and we've had. I think the first trip we did was very much like a football players trip, and it was our mates who came out, and it was all about the football. But then it's changed. Now we have a real mix of people who are coming out because they're mainly interested in playing football, but some who are more interested in the wider experience. And actually, everybody goes home remembering the wider experience. And the football is one part of that. You know, we go into schools and deliver the health education in the afternoons, but then play a game against the teachers in front of hundreds and hundreds of kids, and that is just an unbelievable experience.
So regarding the kids and the youngsters that you've been working with since 2005, are there any particular success stories, like someone who you met really young and they've since gone on to, I guess maybe South Africa would be the nearest big professional league, or even a different success story in that they've gone on to become just a teacher or a doctor? Who do you look back on as being one of the success stories of the program?
Yeah, so there's loads, but the one that stands out for me is a girl called Sanate Letsi, a young woman, Sanate Letsi, who started with us probably in her young teens, and was a really good football player, also very good coach. She became a life skills coach for Kick for Life, delivering the sessions that she used to be part of. And she became a player in our women's team when that was founded. And then a few years ago, we were able to secure an opportunity for her to go and study in the United States on a full scholarship. So as a student athlete playing football and also studying over there. And now she's moved on to another course in Canada. She's an amazing role model, key player for the Lesotho national team. And just a brilliant story, and very exciting to see what she's going to go on to beyond her studies in America and in North America.
So what does something like Kick for Life need to survive, thrive for another 17 years so that we keep hearing such success stories?
Well, at the moment, we're coming out of that tough 2 year period. So, for example, our hospitality social enterprises had a tough time, as did hospitality businesses over the last 2 years. So, trying to, they're back open, and we're trying to get them back to where they were. Trying to continue building new funding partnerships, to bring new partners on board, and get our tours running out again. So we haven't been able to do one of those for a few years now. So, getting back to where we were, and then building on that really. Getting our stadium built will be another exciting thing for Kick for Life. So yeah, lots of things in the pipeline for the organisation.
The theme of our podcast, Steve, is 21 lessons for sporting in the 21st century. So, I mean, we could ask you for 11 lessons just by the book. But is there any just one particular one that you would almost sum up your experience, either about just related to social causes or for sport in general? How would you sort of sum up the work that you're currently doing in one lesson, if you can?
Yeah, I should have thought about that in advance, really, shouldn't I? I think it would be being true to our values as an organisation. That maybe sounds a bit vague, but I would say it's always been an adventure at Kick for Life. It's always been new stuff happening for the right reasons. So making sure we're true to that, that we reflect the people who we work with. So, for example, we've never tried to put ourselves at the forefront of the organisation in terms of delivering ourselves or of making all the decisions, and actually empowering local people to make decisions about their future. So there's a few things wrapped up in there, but it's all values-based stuff, and I think identity as well. So I'd say our identity has evolved as an organisation. We started off with HIV prevention. We've now become more identifiable around like social enterprise and gender. So we've evolved in that way, but actually our values probably haven't changed, and that ingredient of football hasn't changed either. That's always been absolutely key and core to what we do, and I think always will be.
Great. So yeah, I think that brings us to a sort of a nice conclusion. Where can people listening, Steve, find you and find Kick for Life? What's the websites and social media? And
yeah, so kickforlife.org is the website. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, etc. And me on LinkedIn, Steve Fleming. And then the book Radical Football is available online, Amazon in the UK, in Waterstones. You can get it. A number of other online sites around the world where it can be purchased. And there's an ebook edition as well.
Fantastic. Well, it's been really, really interesting to hear from you and about the importance of social change in football and in sport in general. And like you say, I'm hopeful that more can be done and more will be done in that regards. Stuart?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I'm definitely going to have two more book sales ticked off when you check Amazon tonight. One in Barcelona, one in Düsseldorf, I'm sure.
Great stuff. Well, thank you guys. It's been a real pleasure talking to you both.
No, thank you. It's been enlightening, and thanks for sharing such a wealth of knowledge and experience on such an important topic.
Thank you.